I was halfway through swallowing another insult when my mother stood up, tapped her glass, and smiled at everyone around the dining table. "Tonight," she announced, "we need to discuss Ethan's wasted potential." The room erupted in awkward laughter. My brother smirked. My sister looked down to hide her grin. Even my uncle shook his head in disappointment. And then my phone rang. I almost ignored it. I wish they knew who was calling, because 10 minutes later, the same family that mocked me would be staring at me like strangers, but I had no idea what was coming next. My name is Ethan Parker. I was 32 years old, single, and according to my family, the biggest disappointment in our bloodline. My older brother Ryan was a surgeon. My younger sister Claire was a corporate lawyer. My cousins worked in finance, tech, and real estate, and me? I ran a small landscaping company, at least that's what everyone believed. Every family gathering felt like an interrogation. "Still cutting grass? You were so smart in college. What happened to your ambition?" The questions never stopped. At first, they hurt, then they became background noise, but my mother never let it go. She had built her entire identity around having successful children. Ryan made her proud. Claire made her proud. I embarrassed her, or at least that's what she thought. The truth was far more complicated, but nobody had ever cared enough to ask. That Sunday started like every other disaster. Mom invited everyone to dinner. The entire family showed up. The expensive wine came out, the bragging began. Ryan talked about a medical conference in Switzerland. Claire discussed a merger worth hundreds of millions. Everyone applauded, then Mom turned toward me. "Ethan, how's the lawn business?" The table grew quiet. I smiled. "It's good." She sighed dramatically. "Good?" I knew that tone. Everyone did. The execution was about to begin. "You graduated near the top of your class," she said. "You had so much potential." There it was, the speech, the one I'd heard 100 times. "You could have been anything." Ryan leaned back. Claire avoided eye contact. Nobody stopped her. Nobody ever did. Then she stood, actually stood up, raised her glass, and called a family meeting. About me, the humiliation was so public, so deliberate, that even some relatives looked uncomfortable. "I worry about Ethan," she said. "I worry that he's settling." Every word landed like a punch. She talked about opportunities, mistakes, poor decisions, lack of ambition. The entire table listened, and nobody defended me. Not one person. I felt something inside me finally go quiet, not anger, not sadness, something else, acceptance. Then my phone rang a new number. I stood. "Excuse me." Mom rolled her eyes. "Of course." I walked outside. The cold air hit my face. I answered. "Hello," a calm voice responded. "Mr. Parker, this is David Walsh from Hamilton and Pierce Capital." My heart stopped. Hamilton and Pierce was one of the largest investment firms in the country. I knew exactly who they were and exactly why they were calling, but nobody else did. "We've completed our due diligence," he said. "The partners have approved the acquisition." I closed my eyes. For 3 years, I had been secretly building a technology platform for commercial landscaping companies. Software, scheduling, fleet management, cost tracking, everything. I had started it after noticing problems in my own business. Eventually, hundreds of companies adopted it. Then thousands. I never told my family. Not because I wanted revenge, because every time I shared an idea, they laughed. Eventually, I learned silence was easier. Now, Hamilton and Pierce wanted to acquire the company. The number he quoted nearly made me drop the phone. $48 million. I stood frozen. The deal was real. The paperwork was complete. The wire transfer would happen within days. "Congratulations, Mr. Parker." I thanked him, hung up, and stared into the darkness. Then I heard my mother's voice from inside. "Maybe Ethan just lacks drive." The family laughed. Something changed inside me. But that wasn't even the real betrayal. I walked back inside. Nobody asked who called. Nobody cared. Dinner continued. The insults continued. Then Ryan said something that made my stomach twist. "You know what Dad used to say?" Mom smiled. What? Ryan laughed. He said Ethan would always need someone to rescue him. Everyone chuckled, everyone except me, because Dad never said that. Not once. My father died 7 years earlier. And before he died, he told me something very different, something I had never shared, something that would soon change everything. I stayed quiet, finished dinner, went home, but I couldn't sleep. Ryan's comment kept replaying in my head. Dad never said that, so why lie? The answer arrived 3 days later in a way I never expected. I received a call from Dad's former attorney, a man named Harold Simmons, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Ethan, he said carefully. I found something. My pulse quickened. What? A file. Silence. A file your father asked me to keep confidential. I drove there immediately. The folder looked ordinary, brown paper, dusty edges. But inside were documents that shattered everything I believed. Dad had owned significant shares in a private manufacturing company. Shares worth millions today. I knew that, the family knew that. What I didn't know was what happened after he died. The documents showed that Dad intended those shares for me, not Ryan, not Claire, me. Because I had spent years helping him build the company before college. The paperwork was clear. Dad's wishes were clear. Yet somehow the shares had been transferred elsewhere. I felt sick. Then I discovered something that shocked me. The transfer authorization had been submitted 6 weeks after Dad's funeral, signed by my mother, and witnessed by Ryan. I stared at the documents, unable to breathe. The inheritance Dad intended for me had disappeared, legally redirected, quietly buried. Nobody had ever told me nobody. I thought that was the worst part. I was wrong. Because Harold handed me one final document, a handwritten letter, Dad's handwriting. I recognized it instantly. Ethan sees people differently, it read. He builds things. He creates opportunities. One day he'll surprise everyone. Tears filled my eyes. For years I'd been treated like a failure, while the one person who truly knew me had believed in me all along, and my own family hid it. That night I made a decision, not out of anger, out of clarity. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to threaten anyone. I was going to expose the truth, legally, patently, completely. What happened after that changed everything. The acquisition officially closed. $48 million. After taxes, advisors, and legal costs, I still had more money than anyone in my family imagined. I told nobody. Instead, I hired investigators, forensic accountants, estate attorneys, the best professionals I could find. Months of records were reviewed, transactions examined, trust documents analyzed. The deeper we looked, the uglier things became. The inheritance transfer was technically legal, but only because critical information had been withheld. Information I should have received. Information Dad specifically requested. The evidence was overwhelming. Meanwhile, my family remained completely unaware. Mom still called me every few weeks, mostly to criticize. Ryan still offered career advice. Claire still spoke to me like I was a child. None of them knew the ground beneath them was already cracking. Then another twist appeared. The manufacturing shares Dad intended for me had exploded in value. What had once been worth a few million now exceeded $25 million, and the people benefiting from them. Ryan and Claire, the realization made my blood run cold. For years, they had quietly enjoyed wealth that wasn't supposed to be theirs, while mocking me, humiliating me, treating me like charity. But their luck was about to run out. My legal team filed claims, requested records, demanded disclosures. At first, they ignored everything. Then panic started. The phone calls began. Ryan called first. What is this? His voice shook. I smiled. What is what? The lawyers. I stayed silent. For once he had no answers. For once he felt uncertainty. Then Mom called, crying, demanding explanations, demanding loyalty, demanding family unity. Funny how people discover family values when their money is threatened. But that wasn't even the final twist, because during discovery, investigators uncovered evidence that neither Ryan nor Claire expected amons. Messages, tunnel discussions, years old, the truth became undeniable. They knew, they had always known. They knew Dad intended the shares for me, and they accepted them anyway. That revelation changed the entire case. Suddenly, the issue wasn't misunderstanding, it was concealment. Everything shifted, negotiations began immediately. Their attorneys pushed for settlement, fast, very fast, because nobody wanted the evidence becoming public, especially Ryan, especially Claire. I listened quietly. Then I made one demand, a family meeting, the same dining room, the same table, the same people. The request confused everyone until they realized I was serious. 2 weeks later, everyone gathered again. Just like before, same chairs, same walls, same family. Only this time I wasn't the target. I arrived last. The room felt tense. Nobody smiled. Mom looked exhausted. Ryan avoided eye contact. Claire seemed terrified. I sat down, silence filled the room, then I stood. Exactly like Mom had months earlier, the irony wasn't lost on anyone. I'd like to discuss wasted potential. Nobody spoke. I opened Dad's letter and read it aloud, every word, every sentence. When I finished, tears streamed down my mother's face. Ryan looked broken. Claire stared at the floor. Then I placed the inheritance documents on the table, one by one, evidence, dates, signatures, transfers, truth. Nobody could deny it anymore. The silence became unbearable. Finally, Mom whispered, "I thought I was helping." I looked at her. "No," my voice stayed calm. "You were choosing favorites," she cried harder. Ryan stood, tried to explain, tried to justify, tried to rationalize, but every explanation collapsed under the evidence. Every excuse sounded weaker than the last. For years, they treated me like the family failure, yet I was the only one who never stole from family, the only one who never lied, the only one who never manipulated Dad's wishes. And they finally had to face that reality. Then I revealed one final secret. The acquisition, the software company, the $48 million. The room froze. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Ryan blinked repeatedly. Claire looked stunned. Mom stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. "You built that?" I nodded, alone, without help, without support, without belief, without them. The expression on their faces was unforgettable, not because of the money, because their entire narrative had collapsed. The failure they mocked had succeeded, the disappointment they pitied had surpassed them. The son they ignored never needed their saving, and suddenly they didn't know who I was anymore. I thought that would be enough. But one final moment remained. I looked at my mother, the woman who spent years telling me I wasn't enough, and I asked a simple question. "When were you planning to tell me?" She couldn't answer because there was no answer. Only guilt, only regret, only consequences. The settlement finalized 3 months later. The shares were redistributed. The financial damages were resolved. The legal battle ended. Quietly, professionally, legally. Exactly the way I wanted. No screaming, no destruction, just truth. And truth was powerful enough. Today my life looks very different. I invest in entrepreneurs, fund scholarships, support small business owners, the kinds of people others underestimate, because I know exactly what that feels like. My relationship with my family never fully recovered. Some wounds don't. Some betrayals leave permanent scars. But I no longer carry bitterness. That's the funny thing about real revenge. It isn't about hurting people. It's about reaching a place where their opinions no longer control your life. The day my mother called that family meeting, she wanted everyone to see my failure. Instead, it exposed theirs. And the investment banker who called that night? He didn't just change my financial future. He unknowingly started the chain of events that revealed years of lies. Sometimes people laugh at your dreams because they only see the surface. They see where you are, not where you're going. And sometimes the people who underestimate you the most are the ones least prepared for what happens when you finally succeed. Because success isn't proving them wrong, it's building a life so strong that their approval becomes irrelevant. And that was the lesson my family learned far too late.